Page 338, Chapter 22, Entry into Jerusalem. And as they approached Jerusalem at Bethpage, near the Mount of Olives, Emmanuel sent forth 2 of his disciples, and said to them, quote, Go into the village that lies ahead, and forthwith you will find a female donkey tied to a post, and a foal with her. Untie her, and bring her to me, because she is a present to me, and is only temporarily being kept there at the stable, or accommodation. And if anyone questions you, say, quote, Emmanuel of Nazareth needs her, and right away he will let you have her. The 2 disciples went there, and did as Emmanuel had told them. They brought the female donkey and the foal, and they laid their clothes on the old animal, and he mounted it. When his companions heard that Emmanuel, the King of Wisdom, was coming, they spread their clothes on the pathway. Others cut branches from the trees, and scattered them on the pathway. And the companions, some of who walked ahead of him, and some who followed after him, shouted and said, quote, Hail to the descendant of David! Praise be to him who comes and proclaims anew the, quote, teaching of the prophets. And when they entered Jerusalem, the whole city became excited, and many a one asked, quote, Who is it that is coming? The disciples and disciplesses replied, quote, It is Emmanuel, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee, who brings anew the, quote, teaching of the prophets. Purging of the temple, verse 10. And Emmanuel went into the temple in Jerusalem, and became furious when he saw that the traders, vendors, dove merchants, and money changers had established themselves there, and were doing business. Emmanuel was very upset, and said to them, quote, It is written, quote, The temple is to be a place of the teaching of spiritual knowledge, and a place of the contemplation and the edification, or uplifting of one's own thoughts and feelings. But you make it into a den of thieves. In his anger he overturned the tables of the money changers, and the chairs of the dove merchants, and he drove them all out with words of anger. And a crowd of domestic servants, men servants, and maidservants, and others, who wanted to hear his teaching, came to him in the temple, and he taught them all the, quote, teaching of the prophets. But when the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees and Sadducees saw the crowd of people who were listening to Emmanuel's teaching, which he taught, and the people who shouted in the temple, saying, quote, Hail to the descendant of David, they became indignant and in great anger. When they spoke to him, quote, Do you hear what is being said by these people? Emmanuel said to them, quote, Are you afraid of the truth, since you get so agitated about it? And he left them there, and departed from the city for Bethany, where he stayed overnight. Back in Jerusalem, verse 17. And when Emmanuel returned again to the temple and taught, the chief priests and the scribes, the Pharisees and Sadducees, and those of the high council, and rewarded or paid elders of the people came to him and asked, quote, By what rights are you teaching that? And who gave you the authority to do so? But Emmanuel answered, saying to them, quote, I too want to ask you a question. If you can answer it for me, I will tell you by whose authority I am teaching. Whence came the initiation of Johannes? From your God, or from the human beings? They pondered or discussed this among themselves, saying, quote, If we say it was given by our God, then he will reply, quote, Why then do you not trust in his teaching, and why do you not follow the laws given by him? But if we say it was given by human beings, then we must fear the people, because they assume Johannes the Initiator to be a prophet. And so they answered Emmanuel, saying, quote, "We do not know." Thereupon he replied to them, quote, "You brood of snakes and adders, neither will I tell you by whose authority I do my teaching. But what do you think? A man had 2 sons, and went to the first one and said, quote, 'My son, go and work today in the vineyard.' He answered, saying, quote, 'Yes, father, I will go.' Yet he did not go. So he went to the other son and said, quote, 'My son, go and work today in the vineyard.' But he answered and said, quote, 'I do not want to do it, and therefore I will not go.' However, he soon felt remorse, and he went anyway. Now I ask you, which of the 2 did the will of the Father?" And they said, "The latter." But Emmanuel spoke to them, quote, "Truly, truly I say to you, a publican or a prostitute would indeed sooner recognize the wisdom of knowledge than you would. For behold, the latter did not do according to his father's will, rather he disdained him. So only afterwards did he consider the matter and go into the vineyard, which means that he did not do it according to his father's will, but according to his own. Johannes the Initiator and the true prophets came to you and taught you the right way, and you did not trust them. But the publicans and prostitutes did trust them. And although you have seen it, you nevertheless have not done penance, and have not changed your minds, so that you, too, would have trusted them from that time on. You know the truth, and yet you deny it, in order to profit in gold, silver, and goods, and you enrich yourselves at the expense of the poor people led into confusion. You lead them into falseness and exploit them in the name of the faith and your thought up God. And so it will also be into the distant time to come, or future, because the descendants of your bond, or guild, craft, association, equals priests, pastors, preachers, sect leaders, and popes, will do or act the same. But listen to another parable about a vineyard, that you might understand if your sageness or intellect has not broken, or is not broken. There was a lord of a large property who planted a vineyard, built a fence around it, and dug a cellar therein. He built a tower, leased the vineyard to vine dressers, and left the country. When the time for the fruit harvest and the payment of the lease arrived, he sent forth his servants to the vine dressers, so that they might collect the lease payment due to him. The vine dressers seized his servants, beat one, tormented or tortured the other, and stoned the third one. Again the Lord sent out other servants, more this time than the first. However, the vine dressers treated them the same wise as they did the servants before. Finally he sent the son of his administrator to them, and said, quote, "They will be afraid of the administrator's son." But when the vine dressers saw the son of the administrator, they spoke among themselves, quote, "This is the heir, come, let's kill him, so his inheritance will come to us." And they seized him, pushed him out of the vineyard, and killed him. That is what they did. And while presuming him dead, they put him in a tomb, where he remained in a state of apparent death, or unconscious, for 3 days and 3 nights. And then he fled. So he then returned to the Lord of the vineyard, and reported to him. Now when the Lord of the vineyard heard what had happened to the son of the administrator, what do you think he probably did? They replied to him, quote, "He probably had the villains punished and banished, and turned his vineyard over to other vine dressers, who paid the lease to him at the proper time, and surely he turned over the inheritance to the administrator's son in advance." Emmanuel spoke to them, quote, "You have recognized it, and you have also read it in the writings, where it is written, quote, 'The stone that the builders reutilized became the cornerstone.' Therefore I tell you, I am like the son of the administrator of the vineyard, and you are like the vine dressers that leased the vineyard. My teaching, truly, is not foreign to you, and you know it very well, For it has already been given, handed down, and made known to you by the true prophets, but you falsify it and write it down incorrectly, so that you may thereby enslave the people and may gain from them, or can take advantage of them. But if you disregard, falsify, and interpret the true teaching to your advantage, you are also calling me a liar. Thereby you also call the Ishwish a liar, on whose decision I was begotten by one of his kind, and, therefore, stand before you as a true prophet. Therefore I say to you, because of your guilt, the peace and the fortune will be taken from you and from your people into the distant time to come, or future, and all will be given to another people, who will bring new seeds and new fruits to your land. If you disregard and trample on all the laws and recommendations of the Ishwish, who is the ruler over this and the other human species in the north and in the east and in the west and south, you will be disregarded and trampled upon, and pounded by hatred and war for a long time. The burden of your people, and the burden of others, those who today, in the time to come, will be, or equals future as from the year 1844, God believers, will be like a heavy stone of the new great age that is coming. Whosoever falls upon the stone of God belief will be smashed to pieces, and whosoever it falls upon will be crushed. And there will be unpeace and war until the sense of the God believer turns to the truth of the laws and recommendations of the creation. And when the chief priests, the Sadducees and Pharisees, and the scribes heard what he had said, they understood that he gave a prophecy, which was to be for a long time, for them and for the God believers of all peoples, unto the ends of the world, or worldwide. And they conspired on how they could seize him, but they were afraid of the people, because they believed him to be a true prophet.